Hey all, Tom Moran here from Tom's Big Spiders. Well, this week in school, a new batch of freshmen found out that I keep a bunch of spiders, and the questions began flying. This is something that I think anybody that gets into tarantulas and amasses a decent sized collection has to deal with. You mentioned that you have spiders, and then you get a bunch of questions back at you. Some of them that are very, very good questions. Some of them that are a little bit irritating. So today we're going to take a look at, well, what's my list of the top 12 questions I get whenever anybody finds out I have a lot of tarantulas. It was kind of nice because as the kids were firing them off at me, I was actually behind my desk making a little note so I could remember these, because it does tend to be the same types of questions every single time. And again, I get it. I get the other side of the perspective. 30 years ago, if somebody had come to me and told me they had a collection of 250 spiders in their house, I would think they were nuts. I used to be petrified of spiders, highly arachnophobic, and I got my first back in the 90s to kind of get over it. Now I understand what the hype is. Now I definitely, obviously, understand why so many people get into this hobby, but I think for others it's very difficult to really appreciate why we end up with these big collections. Also, I think it's very difficult for them to understand why we would collect something that many people see as potentially dangerous. So without any further ado, let's get into the top 12 questions I receive when people find out I have a bunch of tarantulas. First one we usually get, why so many, or why do you have so many of these? Much of this stems from the fact that I've noticed the majority of people that ask me about why I have so many tarantulas think that all tarantulas are just big brown spiders, and that obviously couldn't be further from the truth. They not only come in a bunch of different colors and patterns, but they have different behaviors, and many of us have noticed that even between the same species, you will find what many of us will refer to as different personalities. There's a lot to love, and I often compare the collecting of tarantulas or amassing a large collection of tarantulas to folks who keep a lot of exotic fish. When you think of the tropical or exotic fish, they come in a myriad of sizes, colors, shapes, and I think that's what attracts a lot of us to it. Now again, I've done whole podcasts on why we love these spiders so much, but on why so many, I think it's because there's just so much diversity with them. Second question I usually get asked without fail, are they all just free roaming around your house? I don't know why, but when you tell people you have all these animals, they immediately, or many immediately, assume that I've just got them everywhere in my house. Just 250 or more spiders just free roaming through the Moran household, and that is obviously not true. Those of us that keep tarantulas know that they are solitary creatures for the most part. They can be highly cannibalistic, and they have to be kept all in their own separate enclosures. So as I explain to people, and this usually blows their mind even further, yes, that means that if I have 250 tarantulas and spiders, I have 250 tarantula or spider enclosures. So they also will ask what we keep them in, and I will talk about how there are a variety of enclosure styles, anything from something you pick up at Walmart for $3 to the beautiful acrylic or glass enclosures that folks like to display their animals in if they want something on the premium side of things. So nope, they're not all running around the house. They're in enclosures of their own. That was usually another question that comes up. Are they all in one cage? That one's asked all the time too. No, if they were all in one cage, I would end up with a handful of fat spiders. I do blow their minds a bit though, with the exception of my M. balfouri, Monocentropus balfouri communal, where I currently have the remaining 5 females still living together peacefully after, oh gosh, I think it's been like 5 or 6 years, but the majority of spiders will not tolerate that type of environment. Next one is usually, what is your largest spider? Right now, this is an easy one because by far my Theraphosa blondie female, who is pushing 9.5 inches or so, is probably the biggest one in my collection, followed up by my Lasiodora parahybana, or the salmon bird eater. She's probably right around the 9-inch mark. And then I talk about how I have many, many species and specimens here that are well over 8 inches. So they can get quite large, and I don't think people appreciate that until they actually see one in person, or if I bring in a giant molt, that usually blows their minds a bit. Next question I often get is, where do you buy them? Now, I live in a state where it is not illegal to own them, but it is illegal to sell them in public, like in pet stores or expos. So if I want to go buy them from someplace and see them in person, I have to go to another state. So in states where that isn't an issue, you can buy them at local pet stores. However, best place I think right now to buy them is online. There are a lot of tarantula dealers that specialize in selling different species of tarantulas. It's easy, it's safe. The shipping is safe. I've had people say that they don't want to do the shipping because they're afraid something's going to happen. Normally, if packed correctly and if people know what they're doing, your tarantulas will come to you safe and sound. I've been doing it for years because, again, I can't buy any in person here, and I've had great luck buying offline. So that usually gets a good giggle out of people because they're shocked that you can actually buy tarantulas online. Next one is usually, what do you feed them? The folks here that you have 250 animals, what exactly are you feeding them? Now, a lot of folks are aware of crickets, but I also explained that we can use mealworms, a variety of different roaches. I explained the fact that I do have 3 different roach colonies going at any given time, so that I have different size prey items. There's a plethora of items out there you can feed them. I know folks overseas, you have locusts. I would kill to have those. They look like great feeding items. We don't have those here. Superworms, a variety of things that they can eat, that can be easily procured from pet stores, or again, even ordered online. Now, the question that usually comes with this one as well is, where do you get the birds to feed them? Obviously, one of the most popular common names out there is the bird eater. People hear this and immediately assume that they will only eat birds. Well, although in the wild, some of them may find low nesting birds, maybe even some of the tree spiders will find birds in nests up in the trees. They don't just only feed on birds, and a lot of them, that doesn't even make up the main part of their diet. So in home, you can easily feed them invertebrates like the ones I mentioned before. No birds necessary. Next question I get is, how long does it take to feed them? Now, a lot of folks, when they think of having to feed an animal, they're thinking of your normal furry animals like dogs, cats, hamsters, ferrets, you name it. Those are animals that have to be fed regularly, often multiple times a day. People don't realize that most tarantula species in the wild, they are opportunistic hunters and feeders, so they may go huge stretches where they don't get prey items, and then when something comes by and food is bountiful, they will fill up on it. So same thing with spiders kept in the collection. They do not need to be fed all that often. I usually feed my slings twice a week. You can get away with feeding them once every week, once every other week. I know folks that feed their specimens once a month. It really depends on whatever works for you. So how long does it usually take me to feed them? Usually a full week to go all the way around the room. I start at one end, work my way all the way around, and then I just repeat. So it doesn't take as long as people think. I usually spend an hour or so a day on the weekdays, and then usually several hours on the weekends to feed them. But it is not a constant affair, and it is not as often as most people will think. Next question I get, what happens when they get out? Everybody inevitably assumes that if you're keeping this many spiders, they're out in your house. I've had folks that don't even want to come over because they think that my house is just filled with escaped creepy crawlies. Not the case. I have not had escapes. Most folks do not have escapes, and if you practice good rehousing and husbandry techniques, escapes are not inevitable. Again, I've been doing this a long, long time, and I do think that if you practice your rehousings, you have good rehousing techniques, you have good husbandry techniques, and escape is not inevitable. So a lot of people don't believe me on this one, but I'll tell you guys, they don't get out all that often. And when they do, if you're doing things correctly, they're usually very easy to corral. Next question I inevitably get asked is, can they kill you? Folks see these big giant spiders and assume that some of them must have venom that can actually kill a human being, and that's not the case. Although there are obviously old world species out there that bite could make your life very, very miserable, there are no species that I currently keep that can kill you. So if you hear somebody say that, they are 100% absolutely wrong. Now, the next one I usually ask is, what is the most dangerous one you have? This one drives me nuts, and this one I think is partially fueled by the clickbaity videos you find on YouTube that talk about how dangerous they are. I honestly don't find them to be that dangerous at all. It really depends on the abilities of the keeper. A good keeper who has solid technique, knows what they're doing, doesn't showboat and play around with them, should have little issue with any of these spiders. I have been working with them now for well over a decade, and I have yet to find myself in situations where I felt my spider is dangerous. I think the trick is, if you do your research, you practice, you work your way up from the New World species to the Old World species and show them the respect they deserve, bites are not inevitable. So I want to make that very, very clear. And that usually leads to the next question. How many times have you been bitten? Everybody automatically assumes that if you're keeping that many venomous animals that have fangs that everybody's terrified of, you must have been bitten several times. Well, no, I've never been bitten. I want to say knock on wood, but I'd like to think I'm never going to get bitten. I do not handle my tarantulas. I think that's a big thing there. Those that do handle the tarantulas put themselves at a higher risk. I'm also very cautious and give them the respect they deserve when I do rehousings. So I do not think a bite is inevitable. In fact, I found the majority of mine are rather shy and would rather get away than stand and fight. The only time you're going to run into issues is if you get a spider that gets jacked up because it's scared. Again, it's not aggressive. It's not trying to hurt you. It's trying to defend itself. In that case, it's just best to close the cage and walk away and let the spider calm down before you try to work with it. But other than that, no, I don't find them to be that dangerous, and I don't have one that I can show you as the most dangerous because I find the whole idea of that to be ridiculous. And finally, the next one I get asked all the time when I mention that I have a bunch of spiders, it is, how does your wife put up with this, or how does your wife put up with you? Which always cracks me up, because anybody that watches my channel knows Billy, my wife, is the one that does all the recording of the videos. I could not do this without her. So not only does she tolerate it, she 100% supports it. Even when we first moved out together all those years ago, she was 100% on board when I got my first tarantula. She's been 100% on board when I've gotten all the rest of the tarantulas. She's up here quite a bit and has been instrumental in building Tom's Big Spiders. I could not have done this without her. So obviously that's one that kind of makes me giggle. It also makes me giggle that people think that I would want to marry them. I've had people go, I would never marry you. Like, okay, that may be the case, and I would obviously never want to marry you either. I just don't get it. But yes, people are floored when they find out that my wife is not only supportive of my hobby, but very much involved in it. So those are my top questions, the top 12. I'd be curious to hear what everybody else is hearing from folks. I know we all get the third degree as soon as folks find out that we collect so many of these animals, and sometimes it can take a lot of time and effort to convince people that we're not crazy. So I'd love to hear at the end of this video or in the comment section what your experiences are, what questions you've heard. As for me, that's it for this one. As always, if you liked it enough to subscribe, very much appreciate. Click the little circle right up in here. You can find some more videos down in here. Obviously, leave your comment behind of what some of the questions are you receive when people find out you have tarantulas. If you take the time to comment, I'll take the time to respond. Just know it can take me a couple days. That's it for this one, guys. Stay safe. Catch you all next time.